Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. It's spring outside, and you can see the windows brighter, so we're starting to get more daylight. We're going to keep reading. This is still our good night story, but Daddy has a meeting tonight, so we're going to read it a little bit before bedtime, but you can play it whenever you want. Tonight's story is called The Heavenly River, from our book Chinese Myths and Legends. On a clear summer night, the Milky Way shines in the sky like a heavenly river. In fact, the Chinese call the Milky Way Tianho, or the Heavenly River. They also call it Yinho, or the Silver River. The story of its creation involves a poor cowherd. This cowherd once lived happily in a small farming village with his older brother on an inheritance. However, his life of contentment soon changed. The older brother fell in love with a local maid who was very greedy, but she hid her rapaciousness behind a facade of demure sweetness. The older brother and this maid were soon married. In no time he was quite under his wife's thumb. The wife's greed soon manifested itself. She longed to get rid of the younger brother so that she and her husband could share the inheritance alone. She constantly scolded the cowherd and made her husband side with her against him. But the young man still loved his older brother and would not leave. Besides, where else could he go? The stocky, vulgar peasant maids in this village did not appeal to him, and he refused to marry. One day, the older brother's wife went into town and bought a packet of poison from the pharmacy. That night, she put the poison into the younger brother's rice bowl. He knew of her thinly veiled dislike for him and her greed, and he did not trust her. Every day, he fed a bit of rice from his dinner to the family dog, before eating it himself. One night, the dog immediately fell ill after eating the rice. It crawled outside in agony, where it died on the family's doorstep. Needless to say, the younger brother went hungry that night. When the wife saw that her scheme had failed, she was very unhappy, and began to torment the younger brother day and night. She started treating him like a servant, and never let him have any money. Soon his clothes became very ragged, and he was always hungry. He was sent out every day to tend the family's old yellow cow. Gradually he began to be very fond of the creature, and even slept in the stable at night with his head resting against her side. To make a little money, he offered to tend the cows of other families too. In time, the entire village began calling him the cowherd. With his shabby clothes and leading a motley assortment of cattle, he really did seem like a cowherd. When the wife found out that her brother-in-law was making money, she demanded that he share it with her and her husband. "But it's only a little bit. I need that money to buy food for myself. I'm always starving," he protested. The wife lost her temper. "You selfish ingrate! We let you live with us, and you deny us a share of your earnings," she yelled. The cowherd was too proud to point out that she was cutting him off from his rightful share of the inheritance, but he was adamant about not handing over his hard-earned wages. There was nothing the wife could do, and she was furious. Knowing that her hen-pecked husband would not stop her, she began planning her revenge. One day, she waited until the cowherd was gone and took the family's yellow cow into town, cruelly driving the animal before her with blows from a stick. As she expected, her husband only watched her leave, amused by her behavior and happy that her attention was not directed at him. After arriving in town, she sold the cow to the slaughterhouse and pocketed the money. When the cowherd found out, he rushed to the slaughterhouse. He arrived just as the cow was being led to the butcher block. The cow was shedding tears from its beautiful brown eyes. The poor cowherd couldn't bear to see the poor beast suffering. he spent all his meager savings buying back the cow. That night, when the cowherd was sleeping by the cow as usual, he dreamed that an old man came to him and said, "You saved my life. I am a spirit disguised as your family's old yellow cow. Because I am grateful, I will give you some advice. Your life is filled with hardship, but you could marry a beautiful maid and move away from your greedy sister-in-law." "Please tell me what I can do to bring this miracle about," begged the cowherd. The old man resumed, "Go south until you see a clear pond. Every day 7 heavenly fairies bathe in this pond at dawn. They leave their clothes in bundles on the shore. Hide yourself until they enter the water and grab one of the bundles. Then make your presence known. The fairy whose clothes you have will beg you to return them to her. Don't do it until she agrees to marry you." The cowherd woke up. What a vivid dream! It seemed so realistic. He looked at the cow. "Did you make me have that dream?" he asked. The cow nodded. The cowherd could not believe his eyes. "Really?" he asked. The cow nodded again. Thoughtfully, the cowherd said, "I will take your advice. After all, I have nothing to lose." Upon hearing this, the cow licked his hand affectionately and then disappeared in a cloud of smoke. The cowherd shook his head in disbelief. "I'll miss you, yellow cow," he said sadly. After packing a light meal, the cowherd started walking south. As twilight approached, he saw a clear pond in a beautiful garden. "This must be the place. I'll just sleep behind this tree until dawn," he thought, as he settled himself for the night. At dawn, he was awakened by the sound of splashing and maidenly laughter. Amazed, he looked out from behind his hiding place to see 7 lovely women bathing and playing in the pond. They were so beautiful that the cowherd's breath failed him. As the old yellow cow had predicted, 7 colorful bundles of clothing were neatly stacked in front of the tree. Quickly he ran out from behind a tree and grabbed one. All the fairies screamed. Each one quickly grabbed her clothes and then disappeared, except for one. She groped for her bundle in panic until she saw that it was in the cowherd's hands. "Please, sir, give me back my clothes. I cannot leave without them," she wailed. She blushed until she looked like a pink pearl glowing in the water. Her loveliness quite dazzled the cowherd. He shook his head to clear it. Remembering the cow's advice, he firmly said, "I'm sorry. I can't do that." "I'll make you rich if you give them back," she pleaded. "Is it power you want? I can have you appointed as a powerful government official." She went on to offer him everything she could think of, even immortality, but the cowherd just kept on shaking his head. The maiden thought to herself, "This cowherd is no ordinary man. He must have help from the gods, or he wouldn't have known how to trap me. He is really quite handsome, despite his poverty-stricken appearance." Finally, she modestly lowered her head and said, "Sir, if you give me back my clothes, I will marry you." The cowherd was overjoyed. "I promise to make you a good husband," he happily told the fairy maiden. The cowherd discovered that the fairy maiden was actually the daughter of the celestial ruler and also the goddess of weaving. The celestial ruler himself married them. He gave them a beautiful house in the celestial realm, and they received many magical and wonderful wedding gifts, guaranteeing them a life of ease. The celestial ruler also graciously appointed the cowherd as the god of cowherds, a post as important as his wife's. Take your duty seriously. If you do not fulfill your obligations, your actions will have dire consequences for the human realm, he solemnly warned the young couple. "We promise to do our best," they joyfully replied, and they began their new life together. At first, the weaving maid and the cowherd tried to obey the celestial ruler and dutifully spend each day overseeing their responsibilities. The cowherd kept a watchful eye on the activities of all earthly cowherds, and the weaving maid did the same with the looms of earthly maidens. However, they were so much in love that each moment they spent apart was torture. When they were finally allowed to be together, they could barely tear themselves apart from each other. One day, they decided to cut their daily duties down by 1 hour so that they could spend 1 hour more together. Soon, they each spent less and less time at their appointed activities. It was not long before they agreed not to show up at work at all, and instead to spend the entire day together. Predictably enough, they soon abandoned their posts entirely and frolicked all day and all night together, without giving a thought to the consequences. On earth, chaos struck. Cowherds began losing their animals, which wandered off or fell ill, and weaving maidens had huge tangles in their looms, making the production of cloth impossible. People suffered because they could get no meat or milk from their lost livestock, and their clothes became very shabby indeed when cloth became scarce. In desperation, they sent up piteous prayers to the celestial ruler. When the celestial ruler heard their pleas, he was furious. He commanded the cowherd and the weaving maid to appear before him in his imposing palace. "You have shirked your duties. I warned you that your actions would have dire effects. People everywhere are suffering because of your selfish laziness," he roared at them. Frightened and ashamed, they hung their heads and turned red. The weaving maid pleaded, "Please, father, do not punish my husband too severely. It is my fault. I love him too much, and—" "No," the cowherd interrupted. "It's my fault entirely. You see, I am the one who persuaded my wife to spend the day at home instead of—" "Silence!" bellowed the celestial ruler. "Can't you see that you are only enraging me more with your pathetic excuses? Your love has blinded you to the needs of others, and you think only of yourselves. You must be punished for your thoughtlessness. I decree that you shall see each other only 1 night a year, and that night shall be the shortest night of the year, the summer solstice, which is on the 7th day of the 7th month." He waved his hand, and they were transported into the starry blackness of the night sky. The celestial ruler summoned guards to hold the lovers apart, but soon they were not needed. A thread of water appeared between the couple. At first it was only a trickle, but it grew until it was a rushing torrent. The terrified couple each scrambled back from it and away from each other, and had to keep scrambling as the river grew wider and wider. Soon the river was so wide that it was fathoms deep and impossible to see the other bank. When the river stopped growing, the lovers couldn't see or hear each other. Heartbroken, they sadly turned away from the river and went back to their duties, which thereafter they fulfilled admirably. However, on the 7th day of the 7th month, they each hurried to the Tianho, or Heavenly River, as it was now called. The cowherd had changed into his best clothes and looked handsome indeed. The weaving maid had on a beautiful new robe of iridescent rainbow-colored silk that she had spent all year weaving. At first each stood dismayed at opposite banks of the river, not knowing how they were supposed to cross. All of a sudden a great flock of magpies flew down and made a living bridge out of their bodies. Tentatively, the weaving maid set one dainty foot on the bridge to see if it would hold. When it did, she let out a cry of joy and hurried across. She met her beloved husband in the middle. That is why The Chinese say that magpies have a bald spot in the late summer. Their heads have been rubbed bald from being trod upon by the feet of the two eager lovers. After their night of love, the cowherd and weaving maid sadly said goodbye to each other, and returned to their posts, he on one side of the river and she on the other. And so it has gone on each year for longer than anyone can remember. The lovers fondly think about each other all year long, and look forward to their next meeting. Then, on the night of the summer solstice, they joyfully hurry across the Magpie Bridge to store up more happy memories for the long year ahead. The Heavenly River, from Chinese Myths and Legends. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good night, everybody.